you have the best opportunity for making the most out of any psychedelic experience that you might partake of. So like Adam was saying, I am a licensed psychotherapist. I also have several side hustles. I'm a combo facilitator. And I, about 2 years ago, opened a psychedelic psychotherapy clinic here in Arizona, focusing on legal medicine. So right now, in addition to like traditional psychotherapy, I do cannabis-assisted psychedelic therapy and ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, and I am really privileged to have the anesthesiologist that I work with here tonight with me, Dr. David Van Lerp, who's here, and I work with him in his ketamine clinic to offer that psychotherapy. There's a lot of other things that I dabble in, and if anybody has questions about different things, I've really kind of immersed myself in the psychedelic world, so I have a pretty good field of experience with a lot of different medicines. So just to start out with, so what are some of the reasons that all of you here use psychedelics?
Trauma.
Okay, so resolving trauma.
Introspection.
Introspection.
Improving self-awareness.
I think someone said grief over there.
Working through grief.
Phenomenological experience.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoyment.
Yes, recreation, enjoyment. There's lots of reasons, right? So, some of the bigger categories are spiritual exploration, having a sense of connection. So people talk about trauma, grief. Sometimes even working through maybe belief systems that are not really as effective as they could be. So psychological exploration, healing, scientific research. So especially like with ketamine, for instance, there's so much research on how it improves new neuronal growth and like the production of new neural pathways. Creative problem solving. So sometimes like Steve Jobs, there's been many especially IT people that have been under the influence. I think it was somebody else that discovered some DNA gene sequencing through the use of psychedelics. So creative problem solving, and then connection with your community, having a good time, play, recreation, and when done in safe environments, that's totally a reasonable exploration for using psychedelics as well. So some of the reasons why harm reduction, and I'm going to talk a little bit about integration. Unfortunately, I wasn't here last week. I was actually in Hawaii working with a Colombian group doing some of my own healing. I know that there was a little bit of talk about integration, but integration is actually a really, really big part of harm reduction and understanding what the process is of the aftercare. So what psychedelic actually means is mind manifesting or revealing. And just going to get off point a little bit. One of the things that I have found so amazing in the work in psychotherapy is how do you tell somebody if they're in denial? How do you know if you're in denial? Right? It's an impossible loop, but I've worked with people sometimes for years and years. I've been a psychotherapist for a much longer time than I've been doing psychedelics. But with a really good intention, psychedelics are one of the most amazing ways to release some of those defense mechanisms and get past those veils of illusion, and really getting into your subconscious and your unconscious brain. So a little bit like I referred to earlier about with ketamine, but it's with many psychedelics, new neuronal growth and synaptic plasticity. So allowing your brain to actually be adaptive and think in new ways. I'm not sure if any of you have seen the Carhart-Harris picture from the psilocybin, and you can see before and then the placebo group of all of the connections that are created with the use of psychedelics. So sensory alterations, heightened sensory perception, visual, auditory, tactile, access to expanded time and space. And that's one of the really amazing things. I'm sure any of you here who have done some psychedelics and really being in the moment, right? And noticing maybe things that, especially if you're outside, noticing the beauty of nature, how amazing the fractal petals of a tree or a flower might be. And that's because it helps you really ground in the moment, and then with the expanded sensory perception, it actually is helping teach you how to have that expanded awareness in the rest of your life. So it actually does alter your consciousness through the alteration of brain waves. Alterations to cognitive processes and memory processing. So entropy and reduction of activity in the default mode network. Does anybody know what the default mode network is? Anybody want to share?
So basically the default mode network is when you're making decisions throughout your life. It kind of locks you into a channel of a pattern way of thinking so that it's easier to make those decisions so you don't have to constantly rerun like the process of making that decision over and over again. Mm-hmm. So when I'll let you.
So that's what I think in Michael Pollan's book he talks about like shaking the snow globe. So sometimes those things they're helpful, right? When they're very intentional and conscious, when we make those habits of like the things that we do every day, like if you have like a morning routine and it's been carefully thought out and you're like, okay, this is really important that I do all these things because it's good for my health. But those things can also backfire on us when it becomes like a problematic way of thinking or like maybe a habit we don't want. And so psychedelics can like shake the snow globe up so it becomes smooth again, and we can have a more expansive way of seeing like different perspectives on things. And then alterations to emotional perception. Oftentimes with many psychedelics, people have an increase in their ability to feel emotions, and maybe something that you've been avoiding or repressing can come up so that it can really be taken a look at and dealt with. So Francois Brzot, I don't know if anybody has read the book Consciousness Medicine. It's a really, really great book. She did a lot of work in Mexico with psilocybin. And she talks about how historically consciousness expanding rituals were part of ceremonial things through life. So birth, death, weddings, and all of those things historically with most traditions have included like preparation and integration. So anybody who's maybe like worked with like indigenous tribes or things that have had like a significant history of tradition. Psychedelic experiences throughout history today typically include preparation and integration. And harm reduction is an intrinsic part of preparation. So it's really something that when you make the whole process conscious, you're going to have a much better result. So what harm reduction is are strategies and ideas aimed at reducing the negative consequences of drug use or medicine use. This is a more mainstream definition. And integration is the process of taking what was experienced and acquired during a psychedelic experience and consolidating it into one's daily life, maximizing the benefits and the gifts while mitigating the challenges and the distress. So a thoughtful and deliberate preparation process assists to make the integration process less complicated and then supports the growth and progress towards goals. So has anybody here, like throughout the process of using psychedelics, had like a very conscious process for preparation or integration? Does anybody have like a comparison? Yeah.
Like a conscious process is in like really intentional preparation and all of that.
Yep.
Yeah, my therapist was trained in that, so she was really helpful with helping me prepare and get intentional and go into it with the right mindset, all of that.
So how's that like resulted in a different outcome for you?
Well, my experience was preparing with ayahuasca.
Okay.
And that was more so of really releasing the desire to control like what I was going to be experiencing and all of that. So it really opened me up to learning a lot of things that I don't think I would have learned had I gone into it with a very different mindset.
That's awesome. I think that is great with ayahuasca. I think that's really something you could probably use across the board with most psychedelics too. The process of learning how to surrender, release control.
Absolutely.
So something psychedelics are also really great for. Yes.
My friend took me through my first mushroom journey, and it was so intentional. Like, I have had some psychiatric issues, and I've got a brain aneurysm, so I have to be really careful. And she made it the
Did that help you with your integration?
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Has anybody had a kind of a negative experience because of lack of preparation, or like whether it was your own account or maybe you were sitting with somebody that could have done a better job?
I think any time that I've made not any time, but almost every time that I've made the decision to do it in a setting where there was too many people and too much sensory overload, it pretty much demolished any recreational aspect, let alone the fact that I couldn't have like an introspective experience. And over the years, I've learned that what tends to work best for me for getting the most out of an experience is usually like doing it alone or maybe with one other trusted person, muted lights, maybe soft music if anything, and some relatively easy access to nature. I feel like people, use them for all kinds of different reasons, and everybody's brain is wired a little bit differently. But for me, dealing with like social anxiety, that's been a big thing, a big component that has played into why I would want to get into psychedelics in the first place and why I've used them in the past. And so, overwhelming myself with too large of a social group, especially under the state of mind that, like mushrooms have been my primary one, but that induces, it was a tremendously negative experience almost every time I did it. So I definitely learned the hard way on that one.
We're going to talk a little bit more about set and setting, but that's huge, right? And I think, not just like the increase in emotional and sensory perception, but, like even energetics have been measured. And I think that it also increases like your ability to like be exposed even to other people's energetic influences. And when you're in that really heightened state, it can be very overwhelming. So one of the first things I want to talk a little bit about with harm reduction are legal risks and issues. So the Controlled Substances Act. So as most of you know, a lot of the psychedelics that people use are not legal. Whether it's like with certain things, even still like with cannabis, but and even sitting with a church is still considered like a gray area under like the First Amendment rights. So the Controlled Substances Act classifies most psychedelics as Schedule 1. I will avoid that soapbox because I'm pretty sure that everybody here would be on it with me as far as like no medical or medicinal purposes. But so what Schedule 1 means, according to our government, is that the drug or substance has a high potential for abuse. The drug or other substance has no currently accepted medical use in the United States, and there's a lack of accepted safety for use of the drug or other substance under medical supervision. Now, like I said, I'm sure all of us can disagree with that. First of all, nearly all psychedelics do not have a high potential for abuse, and we're getting more and more research now, especially like through MAPS, and hopefully MDMA is going to be on the horizon here pretty soon, psilocybin shortly thereafter, but it's been a long time coming. So Schedule 1 substances include any material, compound, mixture, or preparation which contains any quantity of whatever substance they're referring to. And in Arizona, possession of a dangerous drug in Arizona is a Class 4 felony that can result in up to a year in jail, up to 3.75 years in prison with priors, and fines no less than $2,000 or 3 times the value of the substance. So I mean, this is something that people need to keep in account when you're choosing to dabble in this world. So what's currently included on the list of Schedule 1 drugs? So MDMA. Hopefully we're going to be seeing some changes to that soon. But even with the changes, I've caught wind that doing MDMA once it's approved is going to be like $30,000 commitment with the 2 therapists that have been trained. Bufotenin, which is the active ingredient in Bufo, 5-MeO-DMT. DMT, also contained in ayahuasca. Iboga and ibogaine. LSD, so mescaline, and mescaline is contained in San Pedro, Huachuman, peyote. Psilocybin, and cannabis. So, in Arizona, we're going to talk a little bit about that, but cannabis is still a Schedule I drug federally. So in 2010, the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act was passed. And so it does require a medical certification from a doctor, which is pretty easy to get, including the presence of an eligible medical condition. And so medical patients can possess up to 2.5 ounces, and if designated with cultivation rights, may grow up to 12 plants. I think that's like, if it's for you and one other person, I think it's 6 plants. In 2020, the Smart and Safe Act legalized recreational marijuana use for adults 21 and over. So anybody under 21 would still need a medical marijuana card if they wanted it to be legal. So adults without a medical marijuana card can possess up to an ounce of marijuana with no more than 5 grams of concentrate. Can grow up to 6 plants. So marijuana use remains illegal for use in public places. It's a good thing just to keep in mind. Some places are probably riskier than others. Employers can continue to administer drug tests so that if your employer is not down with it, they can still say, I don't want people under the influence. And then laws, and I was here for the cannabis talk. I don't know how many of you were here for the cannabis talk. I know they're doing like some changes in legislation, but I would say it's still a little bit on the risky side. This is kind of an anecdote. And this is a hypothesis from Chanda, but probably about 6 years back, I was doing court-ordered drug treatment for people that had DUIs. And I had so many people coming through that were like, I hadn't smoked in like 2 or 3 weeks. I was driving just fine, and like I feel like I have like a pretty good like sensor on who's just talking and like the people that actually like were like following the rules. And some of the consequences that they were getting, they were having to put like the breathalyzer in their car even though it was for marijuana, and they were blowing for alcohol and all of the things. And it seemed a little bit fishy to me. So just keeping in mind, I don't know if there's like crossover between like the Department of like Health Services and like license plates and stuff like that. But I think it's probably just a good thing to keep on the radar. So I don't want to go too far into this because like I'm guessing that some of you are here for the cannabis talk. But so marijuana and products that contain over 0.3% of THC continue to be illegal under federal law. Everything else is considered hemp. So prosecuting marijuana possession has been deprioritized, but you can still be prosecuted under federal law. So even though it's legal here in the state of Arizona, if someone got a wild hair, they potentially could still go after you under federal law. So this is a good thing to know. So in traveling, it's important to know that federal law can be enforced if you're crossing over state lines. So taking marijuana over state lines should really be paid attention to. And national parks. So if you're in a national park in Arizona, you don't want to take it in there with you because you can still get popped for that.
Damn it.
I know. But that's like the best place to do it too, right? But not the best place if you're gonna end up going to federal prison. So substances are unscheduled in Arizona. Amanita muscaria, which there's other reasons to be careful of using that particular type of mushroom. Salvia and datura, which are all a little bit dicey. So you'd really probably want to sit with somebody who knew a lot about all 3 of those medicines. Ketamine. So ketamine is a Schedule III drug and can be used legally when administered or prescribed by a medical provider. So that is definitely a great option and something that you would have access to here in Arizona. Even though I think that the clinic that I work with is the best one, there are a number of clinics that could make that available to you. You could join a clinical trial. That would make it illegal as well. And you could travel to a retreat center internationally where it's legal. And of course that comes with its own risks as well. You want to make sure like when you're traveling internationally, you know where you're going, really the people that you're going to be sitting with, and like some of the travel concerns. So, legal risks and issues. So, becoming familiar with your rights and how to handle encounters with law enforcement in the event that something goes wrong. And I really encourage everybody to kind of like take a look at the ACLU website to prepare ahead, because if you really know how to like handle these kind of things ahead of time, when you're not like caught with like a deer in the headlights, it's gonna really help you out. So you can reduce risk to yourself by staying calm. So you don't want to get into a fizzle with the officers. So avoid making sudden movements. Don't resist arrest. If you're pulled over, stop the car. You have the right to remain silent. It's it's the normal drill, but lots of times they will want you to not remember those rights. You don't have to consent to a search of yourself or your belongings. You have the right to a government-appointed lawyer, and you don't have to answer questions about citizenship. And I know Adam was like referring to the possibility of like working with an attorney, but even just like traveling in your vehicle, and like I don't want to be giving like people legal advice, but I'm pretty sure that if you have like a locked container in your vehicle, that would require an additional search warrant. So anytime that you're traveling with anything, having that locked in a separate container is at least going to give you like that extra set of protection. So prepare for possible arrest by memorizing phone numbers for family or your lawyer. Having the number of a lawyer on hand is a great thing to do. I think sometimes, like even letting them know that you have nothing to say and that you are going to allow your attorney to handle this for you, I think can be a good deterrent. So say that you wish to remain silent, immediately request a lawyer if you don't have one. And you have the right to a local phone call, and the police can't listen if you call a lawyer. So just keeping all of these things in mind and preparing ahead of time so that it can be smooth. And like lots of times when people get into trouble, you maybe haven't really thought out like all of the steps that you would like to deal with something, and it's a good thing to be aware of if you are going to have like Schedule 1 sentences on you at any time. Okay, so if the police are at your door, ask for identification through the door and do not invite them in unless they have a warrant. This would also go for like the DEA, Department of Homeland Security.
Vampires.
Ask them to slip the warrant under your door, hold it up to the window so you can read it, make sure that it's legitimate. And even if officers have a warrant, you still have the right to remain silent. You don't have to answer questions or speak to them. I don't know how many of you ever had any familiarity with Clay Villanueva before he passed away. A little story about Clay. He was an ayahuasca facilitator. He had a church. And he's part of the NAABC, which is the North American Association for Visionary Churches. They were in the process of suing the DEA. They still are. And the police got a warrant, but failed to tell the judge that it was a church. And they did an illegal search and seizure of his home. And unfortunately, he didn't live long enough to like see the whole thing through. It's still like in legislation, but he got cancer around the same time that this happened, and he passed away about a year ago. And so a lot of us have actually seen things that have gone wrong. Like the government is not always on the up and up. And so really, so really preparing ahead of time and not trusting that they're out there to really protect and serve. I think not to think that they're always the bad guy, but I think just preparing ourselves because like psychedelics are not super popular still, especially in Arizona. We're still like a relatively conservative state, and we're maybe not as progressive as some other places where it's been like decriminalized, like Colorado and Oakland and. So, rights violation and police abuse. So the burden of de-escalation falls on police officers, but you should never assume that they're going to act in that way. Learn your rights and what to do if you believe that your rights have been violated. And again, like I really can't stress enough, like learn your rights ahead of time so that you really can know how to prepare for any of these kind of situations. I would say even if you have a medical marijuana card, you can never be too safe in knowing what all of your rights are because, they make money off this stuff, right? Learn what to do if you think that you're witnessing police abuse or brutality, including using your phone to record video. if you do need to do that, don't hide that you're recording it. Photographs and video cannot be confiscated without a warrant. And I happen to know from some extended experiences that they will try to browbeat you for your phone even without a warrant. So don't give those things up. So, talking a little bit about harm reduction and sourcing. So, has anybody ever gotten a substance and they weren't 100% sure like what it was, or who the person that they got it from was like, this is safe? Okay. I mean, it's fair a lot of times too when you're talking about Schedule 1 things, right? It's not like, you can go and you always even have like, with cannabis now, it's awesome. I love the QR codes. You can like take, like snap a picture of it and get all the deets on it and stuff. So when substances are illegal, sources are often unregulated and often contain adulterants, contaminants. Unregulated substances may also have variations in potency and concentration. I'd say, even with things like, for instance, like natural substances, right? Like psilocybin, like bufo, and you squeeze something out of a toad, and it's not going to be like the same concentration of medicine every time. Really with any natural medicines. So use drug checking reagent kits. So those are like readily available on the internet. You can mail in samples for lab grade analysis. So some of the places that you can do this, these websites, so Dance Safe is a great one. Drugs Data. So Drugs Data is an independent anonymous laboratory analysis and drug checking program on Arrowhead. I don't know, has anybody ever been on Arrowhead?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I cannot highly recommend Arrowhead enough. It's a really, really amazing, great resource. It goes back like years and years, but you get all kinds of information on how things will affect you, dosing. People talk about like things that they've mixed together, good experiences, bad experiences. Pill reports, and get your drugs tested. So those are all websites. And if anybody wants like some information emailed to them, like after this, I can give you some of my PowerPoint notes if you want any of the references here. So, dosing and combinations. So, would just kind of like by a show of hands, how many people, for the most part, do psychedelics on your own? Okay. How many of you like sit with like a trained like facilitator or shaman or medicine person or therapist? Okay. So quite a few people do it on their own. So there's a lot of really great resources for dosing too, besides just like asking your friends. Psychonaut Wiki is a really, really great website. Arrowhead oftentimes has like some really, really good stuff on dosing. So dosing should be researched. Substances should be weighed with a precision scale. So eyeballing things is not always the greatest way to do it, especially when you're talking about things like DMT or bufo or things where like milligrams matter. It's important to remember many factors influence the effects and the experience. So like one dose one time may affect you one way, and then another time you may not have the same effect. The same dose can be experienced as more or less intense in the same person through like a variety of factors. And like this gentleman was saying, like depending on maybe like the setting that you're in, or how much you've eaten, or like even just like the state of mind that you're in. Start low and slow. Know the difference between a microdose, a therapeutic dose, and a recreational dose. This is one of my favorite questions. But what do you guys think is the microdose for psilocybin? Anybody?
0.01 or 0.02 or something.
So somebody said half a gram.
Half a gram.
You know what? It's the reason I'm asking this is not to tease anybody, but I get that a lot. Half a gram is a microdose. A microdose, like technically, is 0.1 or 0.2.
0.1, 0.2,
Yeah. So subperceptual often is a microdose. But it's really interesting how often like people think like a microdose is much bigger than what they actually think, And it's different obviously like, across the different substances. Drug combinations can be deadly. So Tripsit, has anybody ever been on the Tripsit website? Awesome, another awesome resource. They have this huge chart, and you can just like go across the columns and the rows and find your match, and it'll tell you the level of concern, and then you can like look it up and do more research maybe on another website to see like what those factors might be, whether it's like, you know, like a really particularly dangerous like physical contraindication, or if it's, you know, like maybe just something that like you should be aware of is like that can be like mitigated through some other ways of handling it. Okay, so adverse effects of specific psychedelics. So researching on your substance for potential psychedelic journey should include potential positive and negative. So like positive and negative is very subjective, right? But psychological and physiological. So some substances, and like we'll talk a little bit more about this. Like for instance, ayahuasca has a very powerful MAOI that if you're taking an antidepressant, it could kill you. People have died from that. So it's really, really important to know like what kind of drug combinations, you know, could really have those serious negative side effects. So suggested dosing, routes of administration, potential drug interactions. So, you know, like one of the ones that, you know, I deal with most is ketamine, and knowing like even just the different bioavailability, like IV, IM, like sublingual, oral, like those actually matter a lot, right? Like 100 milligrams IV is going to affect you much differently than 100 milligrams sublingual. And then the safety and tolerability considerations. So adverse effects, touched on ayahuasca a little bit. Ibogaine. So it's really, really hard to find iboga in the United States. Iboga, like the natural, like out of the ground root. So, well, I probably ibogaine too. It's not, since it's not legal, but you really have to like do some digging and searching to do iboga. But ibogaine is often done in a clinical setting where people are hooked up to monitors to make sure that like their heart rate and their respiratory functions are being maintained. MDMA, increased blood pressure. I'm sure you've all heard of like, you know, people raving. Body temperature resulting in dehydration. And bufo, like so people wanting to sit with bufo over time, it does have cardiotoxic effects. People interested in doing bufo could actually do like a synthetic version, 5-MeO-DMT. They were really interested in it, but those are some really good things to know. And you know, and even if you're sitting with a facilitator, really finding out like how much they know about all of these adverse side effects and like potential drug interactions or other factors that you might be dealing with. Okay, so the reason why this particular subject is near and dear to my heart is because I've seen so many things go wrong in many different settings. Not under my personal control, I've seen people have psychotic breaks taking ayahuasca. Not necessarily because, you know, of a physical reaction, but maybe because they had a significant amount of trauma and they had not been prepared for, you know, sometimes people go to different kinds of ceremonies and they don't disclose all the information, and I totally get it. You know, people are at the end of their rope sometimes. They have been looking for anything that can help them heal, that can help them feel better, and they don't want to be excluded from something, and so they don't share something, and then that's sometimes like when things really go wrong. Medical emergencies or accidents, so like serotonin syndrome. You know, people like with combo. It's the two things that are most dangerous about combo. If you know, after you've gone through like the list of, you know, like contraindications, are falling and hitting your head and water poisoning. So like the things that, you know, really they're pretty easy fixes. So making sure that, you know, you don't actually drink water that you haven't informed, you know, your facilitator about, and not getting up without assistance. So like I joke with people all the time when I serve combo, I'd much rather clean up an accident on the floor than, you know, like have to call 911 because you cracked your head open. So sometimes it's a little bit about, you know, having some humility even when you're vulnerable. So psychosis, mania, disorientation, confusion, paranoia, re-traumatization, like, and under kind of like a bigger umbrella, just freaking out. So I would say definitely some medicines are more inclined to result in these kind of things. And these don't necessarily have to be like immediate either. Sometimes it's like over a period of time, someone takes a medicine and they feel like maybe they're not like their greatest, but then over time, like it becomes more and more apparent that they're having a hard time functioning. I recently encountered this, actually not with somebody that I was even sitting with medicine for, but at my tattoo studio, one of the apprentices sat with ayahuasca 3 years ago and has never been the same. He was like served by somebody that probably didn't know what they were doing. It wasn't even in a ceremonial setting. And he has been experiencing like high amounts of anxiety, like debilitating anxiety ever since. And that was from a ceremony years ago. So these things that are serious and they can, psychedelics can be amazingly healing, and they also can do a lot of damage if, we haven't like prepared properly. Suicidal ideation, gestures or attempts. Is sometimes, if people have had a lot of trauma and they haven't done a lot of background work, just having a flood of trauma memories can bring people to the brink of, not feeling like they can, keep living in this world. So it's an important thing to keep in mind. So spiritual emergencies. Maybe people have heard about that, like existential crises, or things come up. Obviously overdoses. Some medicines are more likely to have that than others. And reactions that could lead to danger. So running away, encounters with law enforcement, conflicts, sexual assault. So sadly, one of the things that happens more often than one might expect is people traveling like to South America, often and sitting with people that they don't know, and especially women for the most part get taken advantage of. There's been like many incidences of sexual assault by facilitators or people in the group, and in vulnerable situations, maybe you're not with somebody that knows what they're doing, or you're in another country, you don't know the laws, you don't know who to talk to, and you're extremely vulnerable and not in your right state of mind, like to be able to protect yourself, because these things do happen. So, some ways that we can plan for prevention. So, education about the substance, dosing, and possible effects. So, I would say that a lot of the people that I know that are in the psychedelic world are also like amateur researchers. And like, I don't know, like I'm guessing probably a lot of you spend a lot of time on the internet, like reading and like getting books and coming to things like this, so that you can educate yourself more about the things that you're interested in. So emergency planning. So some of the things are just like easy, right? So having an emergency contact, knowing like having somebody on speed dial in case something goes wrong, whether like you need to be like taken for mental health or just somebody that can talk you through something that's rough. Contacts for medical or psychological support, so that like maybe your emergency contact will have the name of like your therapist or a doctor or something like that. This one sounds silly, but like ensuring delegation of all responsibilities. So, making sure that you have plenty of time. Like, if you know that you're going to have to feed your kids dinner at 5 o'clock and they're running around, making sure that maybe somebody else can just have them away from your space. And ensuring just like the time and space is cleared. Like, so the first time I went to an ayahuasca ceremony, I didn't sleep for 5 days afterwards. And, I went on a Friday night. I went for 2 nights. So I went for Friday night, I went for Saturday night. Sunday I still hadn't slept. Monday I started getting worried. I had taken Monday off too, but like Tuesday came around, I had to go to work, and I was like really worried. Like, how am I going to go to work? I had to obviously call out, but really like giving yourself plenty of time and space, especially with new medicines that you might not know how they might affect you. And even like in the clinic, when people do ketamine for the first time, it's really interesting. I don't know if there's an exact science to this, and maybe Dr. V could help us with this, but it's interesting because some people will get really, really tired and sleep a lot. Some people will have this burst of energy and not be able to sleep, and really knowing, like giving yourself time and space, like even around like something that's like done like very medically and therapeutically monitored, knowing like, okay, maybe I should clear a couple of days before I go back to work, so that so that something that's healing doesn't become more stressful. So, if journeying solo, considering your satin setting and making necessary preparations. So, I know that satin setting is probably something that you guys have heard so much about. But let's talk a little bit about that. So, you mentioned some of the things. You know, and it kind of makes me giggle all the time because like Terrence McKenna once said that if you're going to do a huge dose of mushrooms, you should be totally silent with an eye mask and you should be all by yourself and just be inside. But what are some of the other things that you guys like as far as like your set? What are some of the things that you feel like are really important to like creating like a safe container?
Not around a lot of people, not going to the mall. There's two different mindsets. There's like, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and the mindset was either on the Kesey camp, Kesey and the Mary Pranksters, or on the Ram Dass and Timothy Leary.
Yeah.
I always went for the Timothy Leary and Ram Dass. You know, so the setting is don't go to the mall.
don't go to the mall is a really great one. And you know, even like a lot of people do psychedelics at festivals, but even being really careful with that. If you don't know how you're going to react to it, if you don't know, like the substance, if you're not super familiar with it, it can, even if it's like the best music in the world, just having all of that overstimulation could be way too much. Okay, yeah.
I want to say, like, nature is amazing with psychedelics. It really is. And everyone says, do it in nature, do it in nature. And that's great. But when you make a plan as a sober, rational person to go out into nature and do psychedelics, keep in mind you're not going to be that same sober person while you're there. So that's important because it's messed with. If you're out in the woods and you're tripping on something, you're thinking there might be a bear behind that tree. There might be a mountain lion up there. All these things go through your mind. So just prepare yourself. Make sure you're in a safe area, all that kind of thing.
And there might actually be a bear.
There might, right?
Like,
What would happen there? All these, so.
No, that's a really good point. So just last week when I was in Hawaii, I got bit by a centipede in the middle of an ayahuasca ceremony. Yeah, it was a little bit of a buzzkill. I'm not gonna lie. It was like right in the beginning. I got bit, and it was earlier in the day. Somebody had gotten bit by like a poisonous spider, and he was like about to have his like finger cut off. And so then when I got bit by this, I like the whole rest of the night I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. Not the good kind. Like,
was it? You thinking was it real? Were you thinking this a real thing?
No, it was actually I actually did get bit by the centipede.
No, I know, but I mean,
Oh.
how'd you know? Like.
I felt a terrible pinch. I felt a terrible pinch, and then it was attached to my stomach.
See, that's a bad day. That's not a good day.
So I mean, some of those things aren't. I mean, some of those things maybe are not preventable, especially if you're doing medicine work like in South America. Like those things are real. All of the bugs and the spider monkeys and yeah.
So could you talk about the integration and how you made it through that scenario? Because that's really important to be able to breathe through it, or were there facilitators that helped you kind of go, hey, you're okay, we're monitoring this.
Uh-huh.
How did you go through that?
So, so I removed it off of me after I realized that, okay, because there was that little part of me that's like, okay, is this really happening? Like, there's so many stories of people actually having things happen, and then, like, is this really in my head? So, I was like, we were in a covered temple, and so, but they, Hawaii is a little bit like South America, and especially we were in the jungle. So I looked down, and this thing was like this long and attached to me, and so, I mean, I asked somebody, I was like, is this a serious medical concern? They said, no, it's just extremely painful. So, to be totally transparent, I did not drink any more medicine that night. That was overstimulating enough for me. And like, those things are nasty. I don't know, has anybody ever seen those huge centipedes?
Everyone is a pet.
There's some are very poisonous, and others aren't. They're just
Peruvian.
Yeah, well, this one was, so it wasn't the spider, but that was my initial thing, was I felt something bite me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I just saw someone have a necrotizing thumb earlier today, so. I get that is a really great question. So, I would think talking to somebody, if you feel like you are not in the right state of mind to determine whether, like it's real or not, like getting some help. And then obviously then, like having this prevention plan, right? So if you know that you're going to be out camping, like having a first aid kit, having like making sure that you have cell phone service, like if you're out camping and like doing mushrooms, right? And then if you determine that this is not an actual risk, you know, I would say there's like probably a multitude of ways of like working through it, depending on like the level of safety that you feel. So, you know, getting somewhere where you feel safer if you don't feel safe, like where you're sitting. Asking for help is always great. And then, you know, a lot of those times when we have those things come up, it's like, okay, well, what's coming up for me from my unconscious? What is really my unconscious wanting me to take a look at, right? So a lot of people have like visions of spiders or snakes, you know. And I have a client, actually, just a regular therapy client that doesn't even do psychedelics. So she sees like spiders a lot, like when she is really perseverating in OCD. She'll close her eyes and like see spiders. And so I've asked her, like, well, what do you like? Instead of fearing these things, why don't you ask them what the message is that they want to bring to you? So like, you know, like approaching these things. Lots of times too with psychedelics, and this works too with dreams. When we're afraid of things, we tend to run away from them, but like facing them, like squaring up with them, so to speak, you know, like really taking a look at them and talking to them, like interacting with them, engaging with them, which seems scary, but that's a really, really great way to like actually work with the things that are coming up. And that's a big reason why we're often doing psychedelics, right? To see what can come up for us. And sometimes it's not always really pretty. If journeying with a friend, research the venue, the facilitator, and the plans for the experience. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there.
I have a question. So
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier about the individual that you work with in your tattoo studio.
Yeah.
And just totally going off the rails and not coming back the same.
Yeah.
Say an individual would go through the same experience and like, so I'm wondering is that like a permanent state, or is that something that can be therapeutically treated, either redosing, for lack of a better term, and having a more controlled setting, or another kind of psychedelic that can, I guess, rewire the way you work, or get you back to a more stable state?
That's a really good question. So in a case like that, I mean, because I'm a therapist, I probably would want to work with somebody like in a sober setting first and give them some coping skills so that like from in the day-to-day, they are more stable. So even like when I just do trauma work, like without psychedelics, I like for people to be functioning at like a really healthy level before we start diving back into things. So if somebody's already been like traumatized with the use of psychedelics, I personally wouldn't jump back into using them unless maybe it was ketamine. And the reason I say ketamine is because ketamine is the only psychedelic that down-regulates the fight or flight system.
That brings up another question.
Okay.
With regards to preparation and things of that nature, I'm going through something that's called TMS, so transcranial magnetic stimulation. I've been on that regimen for about 8 weeks, give or take. And they were trying to push the whole ketamine therapy on me. Myself being completely ignorant to the nature of ketamine. And
Okay.
The only thing I knew it was people that were doing bumps of it in the backseat of a car when I was in my early 20s. So
I wouldn't recommend doing it for that to like reintegrate something.
Suffice to say, I had the first negative experience with that. And I was a passenger, I was not the driver, so it scared the shit out of me. Having people on a horse tranquilizer, some version of a horse tranquilizer, that were behind the wheel of a 300-pound car. But I guess, like, is there anything to fear as far as ketamine and the dosages? What are the bad things that set my mind? Basically, I'm asking you to set my mind at ease about ketamine.
Okay.
With that, as a supplemental to.
I can totally do a little blurb if people are interested in that, and if you want to wait until afterward, you know, Dr. V and I could probably tag team you. So, ketamine is definitely one of the probably the safest psychedelic done like under clinical and medical supervision. It's done in sub-anesthetic doses, and you're medically monitored the whole time. Probably one of the most significant side effects people get is like bladder irritation, which is very temporary. So it's like during the session, like a lot of times, like at least with the people I work with, they really feel like they have to urinate, and like most of the time there isn't really anything there. You know, in some of the higher doses, if you haven't been doing trauma work, things can potentially still come up that can be disturbing, but you can always start at like a lower dose and kind of like titrate up to higher doses. I work with it, and so you know I'm probably like not you know the most objective person. But I have seen so many amazing stories of healing happen with it, and especially you know if you can do the work with like a therapist, who can like guide you and kind of keep you on track and monitor you the whole time. I think that it's extremely safe and extremely helpful. Yeah. It does all kinds of really cool stuff. I'd be happy to stay after and like tell you more about it if you're interested.
And then next week, like we're having.
I was a little late to the party. What was your name again?
Chanda?
Chanda. Okay.
Yeah.
And then next week we have a talk on ketamine therapy.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, next week there's a whole talk about it. You know, the other thing about journeying with a friend, be really choosy about the friends that you journey with. I mean, you know, and that's not to say that like you necessarily have to get rid of these friends, but like some people are really overstimulating. Some people you know, like that are very quiet. You get like a little bit of LSD in them, and they are on a monologue for hours, like chirping in your ear, and like maybe you don't want that. So, you know, like having a space maybe too that you can like go to, like have like safely be set aside. So taking all of those kind of things into account. Really, you know, like if you're sitting with somebody else, if you're going to a place, you know, like find reviews. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but Adam might know. There's a place where like you can research ceremonies. It's like Ceremony Safe. Is that the name of that website?
Safe Ceremony.
Safe Ceremony. Yeah. So you can get like just reviews from actual people that will tell you like what kind of experience they had. So that's a really great resource too.
Check the date too.
Check the date, right? Yes. Yeah. Things change over time, right?
And doesn't the Shakruna Institute also?
Say again?
Isn't the Shakruna Institute also have something like that?
I think they do. There's a bunch of websites too where you can actually find like integration guides and therapists that are legit. So I have some lists of stuff like that if anybody's interested. Yeah, Shakruna.net is another really amazing resource if you guys haven't checked out for lots of stuff. Okay, so talking about set. So also known as the mindset. So it's the internal environment. So if you've had like the worst week ever, you know, like super stressed, you got in a car accident, maybe going home and doing like a bunch of psychedelics that day is maybe not the greatest day to do that. So emotional integrity. So if you've been super dysregulated, if you've just been like overtaxed, you know, like burning candle at both ends, like that might be a really great thing to take a look at. Is like maybe giving yourself like some self-care that's not psychedelics first, like getting yourself into like a more grounded and centered place. Current stressors, you know, psychedelic healing is great, but you know, like if you're really, really short on money, you know, shelling out several $1,000s on going to a retreat, and that's going to just create more stress for you. Like maybe this isn't the greatest time to do that. Resiliency and resources, and this kind of goes back to like stressors. So you know, if your house is chaos and you have all kinds of stuff going on, and you know people are like, you know, browbeating you, and like maybe that's not the best time. And even going away and coming back into that environment, like right after a ceremony or ceremony weekend, like giving yourself the time and space to be able to integrate in like peace and calm. So trauma history. So really knowing that like psychedelics can be really such an amazing factor in helping to heal trauma, and I've seen people get re-traumatized as well. So making sure that you have that really good foundation. You don't even have to work with a therapist. One of my favorite things in the whole world is DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. Just research it on the internet. You can probably download free stuff. They're like very, very practical skills, like mindfulness, distress tolerance, relationship stuff that you can bring into your day-to-day life, and that's really great. And keeping track of where you're at every day, and just holding yourself accountable with those things. It's like it's you know, obviously I think therapists are great, groups are great, and not everybody has the resources for that. So like, you know, just doing a little bit of digging around and getting yourself to a good, stable place every day, I think is one of the best places to start. Previous psychedelic experiences, and I'm sure that I don't have to let all of you good folks know that not to have any expectations for the first time, and not to have any expectations at all, because every time is different, right? Sometimes every time is like extremely different. And I really would like to get on the soapbox about this one, because intention setting is so near and dear to my heart. And I really think it's one of my personal superpowers, and I've helped so many people set really, really amazing intentions. And if anybody's interested in like a little worksheet that I've developed, it kind of piggybacked off of some stuff from medicinal mindfulness. I went to school where I learned how to do cannabis-assisted psychedelic therapy. Daniel McQueen also is a great resource if you want to check out anything on YouTube. But setting this intention, really kind of, I really like handwriting it. So not just saying it out loud, not typing it up on your computer, but really doing like the pen to paper, journaling about what you want your attention to be, and really being clear about it. And then you're holding it loosely, so it's not like you have to perseverate on it like while you're in the session. And I have seen time and time again how people's intentions come to fruition, never in the way that they expect, of course, right? Because if it was, then you would have already figured it out. But just the most beautiful things. And so really taking some time to figure out, what do I really want to get out of this every time? Even if someone's doing it recreationally, you know, saying like, you know what, I want to have an amazing time. I really want to connect with my friends. I really want to connect with nature. I want to like see the beauty in my environment, whatever it is. And you might be really, really amazed at what comes out of it differently when you really have that intention, you know, like you shoot the arrow and then see what comes forth from that. So the setting, we talked a little bit about this, the location of the venue, sounds and music. Sometimes like music can really be huge. I really love curating playlists for journeys. It's really interesting how you can like really change the mood and like take people into deeper places or have things be more lighthearted and so sometimes making your own playlist. And the last time I did this talk, someone wanted to really like, you know, arm wrestle me verbally over like words or no words. And so I usually like to say no words and maybe something that like soundtracks, you know, maybe like are gonna take you back to something. But I mean, you know, using your judgment and then going back to the intention that you've set, like when you're choosing your music. So lighting, I would say most psychedelics are gonna really increase your like sensitivity to light. So really taking that into account and also making sure that you have light so that you know you don't trip and fall and hurt yourself. Like you mentioned, other people that are in attendance, how many? You can't always control that if you're sitting like with a group, but it's definitely a really great question to ask. Physical comfort. You know, if you're going to like an ayahuasca ceremony, having like a really like, you know, like cushy pad to lay on, no matter what, you know, like if you're in your own home, obviously you can, you know, be careful with that. Some things, like when it comes like to safety, people in bufo sometimes will like flail around. I mean, I've seen it in a lot of medicines, but like making sure there's no sharp corners. Even I would say like if you're doing like cannabis or something, making sure that you don't have any lit candles that are gonna light the house on fire if you like roll over and hit it. And then items to support your journey. So having the things that are gonna make you feel comfortable. So like an eye mask, things that like maybe like smells that are comforting or like elicit certain emotions for you. Having your journal handy. And like, you know, journaling, sometimes you might want to wait until the end, and sometimes, you know, like if it's a really good, you know, insight, you might want to capture it at the time. Like,
I just can't imagine me being able to write.
But it's good.
I didn't know I knew Russian.
So it depends on the medicine. It depends where you're at in the journey. I would say most of the people I sit with in ketamine therapy, like, no way. That's what I'm there for, is taking the copious notes. But yeah, it depends on the medicine and where you're at, how experienced you are with the medicine. And sometimes journaling can even be a distraction. It can like pull you out of the process. So, really keeping in mind when we're talking about setting, I've seen in lots of ceremonies, people like to chit chat, which is normal, right? And they like to go take care of other people as a way to really distract them out of their own experience, like not have to deal with whatever maybe discomfort or like challenging work they might have to be dealing with. So just to keep that in mind, and it's a learning process, right? It's a learning curve. Some of these things are obviously much less harmful, right? Like it's just getting the most out of your experience. So integration is probably one of my my second favorite thing next to like intention setting. And when you've set a really amazing intention, the integration is so much easier because it's kind of already like laid the footprints for it. So integration is the connection between the psychedelic experience and daily life. So when you have this intention, right, you set this intention for what you want your psychedelic experience to be, then it's not just about the ceremony, right? Like you have this experience, and really it's like, how are you going to carry this out in your daily life so that your life actually changes, right? Because we can't be on psychedelics every day. I mean, most of us can't anyway. So integration assists in reducing stress, challenges confusion, and crises. Even when someone, maybe doesn't have a particularly challenging session or ceremony, going back into the world when you have all of these heightened perceptions, when you have these new insights that maybe you're not sure what to do with, it can be taxing. So having like a conscious integration process also assists in increasing organization, resolving your trauma, so actually having a plan to work on things, mental wellness and flexibility, spiritual development and individuation. And integration is the framework to achieve goals, navigate challenges, increase skill sets in the period following a psychedelic experience. So I can talk a little bit about my experience from Hawaii. So the intention that I set for my experience in Hawaii is that I wanted to work on releasing attachments and dependencies to people and things in my life that really everything, but it was really especially the things that were not serving my highest good. And so the first night, yes.
You released that centipede from attachment to you, so it worked.
Yeah.
It worked, not the way you thought it would.
I did. Totally. So this was the first night. This was not the centipede night, because the centipede night, I really was kind of like, I think I'm just going to chill after that. But the first night, I went in, and I'm sitting with the medicine, and I get like literally this laundry list of all of the people in my life that I need to do something about my relationship with them. And it started with my ex and what I needed to do about that, and it like brought up some things, like trust issues and stuff. And then the next person was actually the person I traveled there with, which was my cousin.
Oh no.
Yeah, that was, and my cousin was somebody that I've had. He's my last living relative that I have a relationship with besides my kids, and I've really been trying to hang on to this relationship. And there's a lot of really great things about him, but there's been a lot of things that have been really eating away at me for several years. I've been wanting to talk to him, but like, to be totally transparent, I was like, I had this fear of like losing my last living relative. And the medicine was like, you need to talk to him. It's like, you need to talk to him and tell him how you feel. And I'll kind of circle back around to that. But then, I got like little blurbs on all of the other people. And, in my mind, when I was like, oh, I want to release these dependencies and everything, I just thought like, of course, like this, like, oh, I'm just going to like let go and I don't need these things. But no, I actually got like a homework list of like what I needed to do for like each person, right? And so like all the rest of them were easier. My cousin turned out to be the most challenging. So the next day after we like slept, I was like, hey, can I like talk to you? And he's sitting in the ceremonies too. And he didn't take it well. It was kind of a bummer. And, it was, and that's been a challenge for me to integrate. I've been like kind of going through a grief process myself and recognizing that like, well, there's probably a reason you've been putting this off. Like, you knew that this probably needed to happen, and yet it was really important to happen because like, do I really want to continue to have a relationship with somebody who's like, really not in reciprocity with me as far as like time and energy. And so that was, a little bit about my integration process. And I still have like a few things, like a few ends to tie up. But some of them were just little things, like if some emails I needed to send to people that I needed to follow back around on, and like, oh, you know what, you never called this person back. It was like, and I went through a bunch of people, and I didn't know that I was going to get a list of like how I needed to follow up with all the people in my life, but it pretty much hit the nail on the head. So integration is a framework to achieve goals, navigate challenges, and increase skill sets. So one of the things that Daniel McQueen talks about that I really, really love is setting, and skill, right? And people don't talk about skill too much, about sitting with psychedelics. And it's something that mostly I would say comes with experience and a lot of like introspection and reflection on how can I actually do this better. There are some really, really amazing books. One of them is the title's escaping me right now, but the author's Kyle Ortego, and he has this amazing book on how to navigate psychedelics for like deep, deep psychological exploration. And like people that are, like really want to get on the psychonaut train, whether it's for psychological work, spiritual exploration, problem solving, any of those things, really developing the skills to be able to take this as far as it really can go. There's a lot of places that this can go. Like through medicinal mindfulness, they actually have a program called DMTX, and initially they were just doing this in Jamaica, and they're working on it now in Colorado. And Daniel McQueen has paired up with Rick Strassman. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Rick Strassman, and an anesthesiologist who has found a way to actually pump DMT through an anesthesiology machine. And so you'll get like a continuous stream of DMT. And the objective for that is for the psychonauts to be ambassadors for humanity for alien worlds.
Mapping the territory.
And hopefully making contact. And they're really doing like, it's almost like astronaut training, because like the level of like physical integrity, psychological integrity, like emotional integrity that you have to maintain that level of DMT over a course of hours is pretty significant. So that's a skill set for sure.
Yeah, Hamilton Morris just interviewed Andrew Gallimore.
Yeah, that's
Gallimore.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to hear more about it, it's on Hamilton Morris' podcast.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually did the training for that program, the DMTX. So it was pretty awesome. And they before DMT was legal here, they were using it through cannabis. So cannabis is also a really amazing medicine that you can do a lot with. So a little bit more about integration, journaling as soon as possible after the experience, if you're not able to do it during, can help with retaining important content, memories, insights, things that like you might want to like reflect back on. Grounding and mindfulness are the foundational tools for contact with emotions and somatic experiences. Has anybody done any kind of work with like somatic experiencing or somatic therapies? Those are really, really great for using with psychedelics. For like being in your body, so you're having that like grounding connection in your body while your mind is 18 dimensions out. Identifying self-care practices that support well-being. What are some of your favorite self-care practices? Anybody?
Yoga.
Stretching.
Walking.
Say again? Baths.
Essential oils.
Mm-hmm.
Go for a walk in nature. That's
Yeah.
always good.
So it's funny because I think people not as grounded in psychedelics because those are all really amazing answers. We'll say things like, "Oh, I went and got a manicure," or I hear that one like a lot. I got my hair and nails done, and that can be really great, like taking care of your physical appearance. But the best self care is listening to your body and your mind and doing whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, whatever it is. It might be just drinking a glass of water when you're thirsty, which is not something I'm great at. I'm still working on that one myself. But really, it's grounding back in and using that heightened level of introspection and awareness and consciousness to figure out what it is that you really need and then giving it to yourself. Addressing daily stressors that can lead to emotional overwhelm and dysregulation. So just taking care of yourself, maybe not overworking, maybe not doing the things that like push you over the edge. Maybe like some of those habits that like we use often for like escape and to avoid anxiety. Incorporating skills for trauma resolution and increasing your quality of life. Increasing social supports. And working with a therapist to maximize the gains and benefits of your journey. And that's awesome that you have a therapist too. That is, I think more and more therapists are starting to get on the horizon with that. But I had a therapist. I am a therapist. And the first time I did ayahuasca, it never even occurred to me. And my therapist actually did her doctoral dissertation on psychedelics. It never occurred to me to talk about it with her. Like, it's so funny, like how like those things are like they can be so integral, and yet it doesn't always come to mind for people. So that's kind of, I'm at the end of what I have prepared. If anybody has any questions or comments, I would love to hear them, answer them if I can.
I have a question on the intention setting. And what guidelines maybe you would put out there for intention setting for a psychedelic experience?
Okay. So you kind of want to start with like a broad question, like what do I really want to get out of the experience? What's my goal? And then if you're interested, I'd be happy to email you like my worksheet
like
later.
Yeah.
But you kind of go through and you say like, okay, what are the possible benefits that I can get out of this? Like emotionally, physically, spiritually, my relationships, my work, like writing down all the potential things that you really would like to get out of
And
it.
are you thinking specifics or generals, or could be either?
It really could be either. It really depends on what you're working on.
Yeah.
So like when I'm answering like these questions, like I might go into more detail, but that might not be that, like I'm journaling these things to prepare for like a more general intention. And then some of the other questions that I have are like, what fears do I have about what might come up? Like what are some of the things that I'm afraid of? Because like if you think about those ahead of time, you can often like mitigate those circumstances, right? Like I'm afraid that this might come up. I'm afraid it might be too much. Okay, well maybe start with a lower dose, right? You can always take more. You know, usually take less. Like what kind of self-talk might get in the way? Like what are some of my own mental processes that might get in the way of me getting the most out of my experience or like achieving this? And then some of the other questions that I kind of stole from Daniel are like, what's been really present for me lately? What's been on my mind lately? What are some of the things I want to explore?
And then I think an important aspect of the intention setting is the integration back into,
because they really go hand in hand. Right? So like my integration was pretty easy for my, I set this intention, right? That I want to let go of some of these attachments, which, like, it was like right on the money. Like my cousin was like, peace out, right? But like with some of the other ones, like my integration was like calling these people or like articulating and verbalizing like to people that like I felt some sort of way about, like having that conversation, right? Like for some of those. Like some of the other things I've been working on is like really using my time wisely, right? And so like doing things as they come up. So the integration for that would be like all of the things that like cross my mind through ceremony that I could be doing a better job of actually doing that in my life, right? So actually like following my morning routine, like picking things up as I like instead of leaving stuff out, like putting things away right away, like doing things as soon as I think about them so they don't forget. Like so lots of it is you'll set your intention, you'll have these insights in ceremony, and then it's pretty easy to have the integration because you can kind of almost make like a written plan, like what that might look like. Sometimes it's interesting.
Writing is the key. A key.
Writing can be a key. Lots of times in like ketamine sessions, people will have. I worked with somebody recently who came in contact with like her inner healer and her inner warrior, and so she started doing like Warrior 3 to like connect with that every day. And her husband took a picture of her doing that, and then she painted a picture of her inner healer that she can connect with and look at every day. I had another client realize that she was a people pleaser, and she was doing everything for everybody in her family, and so she had this image of like Mighty Mouse with his cape like always to the rescue. And so she actually made a little cape and put it in a glass box and hung it on her wall and said, break glass only in emergencies, right? and then she looks at that every day, and so like it's a mental reminder. And she puts some time and energy into creating, like, art and creative expression is really, really great for integration too. Like something that can like really solidify, you know, like what that ceremony meant to you and remind you of like how you want to be living differently in your day-to-day life.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that great question.
So in terms of harm reduction, I mean, steer clear of the physiological stuff. Everyone should be first aid and CPR certified, but you know,
I mean, that's great.
steering clear of that. On the just strictly psychological side, what would you say? Like, are there some key elemental ways that you approach someone who's freaking out, who's having a bad trip, and you want to try to help them, you know, ease them back from the cliff and try to, you know, what's your like best advice?
Okay,
in
do
that
we actually have a
department?
cliff? Is there
No, not a real
okay.
cliff.
Okay.
Metaphorical cliff.
Okay,
but yeah.
all right, okay. I mean, because normally I would say like you don't ever want to make like any sudden movements or like jump on people. But if there was actually a cliff, like I might say that would be the exception to the rule. This is kind of across the board, I think, with any kind of situation. But the first thing that you always want to do is ground and regulate yourself. Like coming in to like intervene on a situation like in a heightened state is only going to get, even if you don't like say or do anything, like it's just gonna escalate the person even more. I have like intervened on a number of psychedelic crises over the years, and I have never had to put my hands on anybody. I sat with a gentleman in Joshua Tree who probably should not have drank ayahuasca and did, and he had a psychotic break and I sat with him for 17 hours. And as soon as he took the medicine, he wanted to assault somebody. And I don't know if any of you have heard of like Peter Levine. He's done a lot of work with like somatics and trauma. And so we did containment. So I had to do a lot of redirection over all those hours. But I tell him like, okay, I want you to take your right hand, put it here, and like hug yourself. And I just had him basically holding himself for most of the night. And then we would stop and be like, no, we're gonna give ourselves a hug. You know, I think it probably, before I was working with psychedelics, I was a clinical director on an ACT team, which is like the highest needs seriously mentally ill people. So I had a lot of experience with like de-escalating psychosis. But you know, like talking to people like they're rational, so not talking down to people, like, you know, remembering that, you know, everybody should still have their dignity. And I really can't stress this enough, but really always coming back to yourself, making sure that you're grounded, making sure that you're like not making a lot of sudden movements, using like pretty neutral language, not forcing people to do things that they don't want to do unless it's really going to be dangerous for them not to. So, you know, like asking, you know, like redirecting people and asking like, well, what are you feeling right now? What are you feeling in your body? You know, like, can you connect? Can you like, I get people like sitting down all the time. Can you feel your sit bones? You know, like having people sit up oftentimes too, because like less times when people are having like psychedelic crisis, they're like all sprawled out. So getting people to like maintain their own integrity, like obviously some medicines, like, you know, like if you're like in a really deep ketamine session, you're not gonna be able to sit up, but sitting up so that you're opening up that channel, connecting with your breath, like things that you probably would guess, like doing some breathing, distraction if things are like really, really overwhelming, like kind of like going in and out of like whatever the experience is, asking what they're feeling, and then maybe like pointing out something that like, oh, you know, like look at the stars outside if you're outside, or, you know, like having them talk about something like, tell me a little bit about your family, or like if that's not what's triggering them. Having them talk about like something that's like that they know about that, you know, like could potentially distract them for a little bit.
That's good.
Something that's really, really handy for a lot of medicines, you can like research this first, but you probably all already know that if you have taken too much cannabis, that CBD can really downregulate because it locks into those receptors. It's good for a lot of other psychedelics as well. It's not going to work as well as like with cannabis, but it also will work with like ayahuasca and psilocybin, so pure CBD.
I have a ton of questions. So one of I don't know where to start, but one of them is like if you are starting to
like trying to dose yourself for like medical reasons, and how do you know like whether if you're supposed to just like microdose, how much to microdose, like if I should trip today or like what I should do, like how do you know what you should do for your you're trying to make some like changes, I guess.
That's a pretty broad question.
No.
Like with psilocybin
I just
specifically.
just like eat some mushrooms.
Okay, well, I would never just eat some mushrooms. I would always weigh them so you know what you're dealing with. There's like a lot of really great resources out there on dosing and like microdosing protocols. Paul Stamets has like some really great information out there on doing like the Paul Stamets stack for psilocybin, like microdosing. He adds in some other kinds like mushrooms and stuff for that.
Then there's the
Niacin
third wave.
Uh-huh.
The third wave has a ton of resources on microdosing different substances.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
the third wave.
Ian Vogel.
Yeah.
Ian Vogel is like our local psilocybin guru. I can give you his website if you're interested in knowing more. He has like a whole. You can get connected with him, and he has like a whole thing on dosing, what psilocybin can do for you, and he can like walk you through his whole like PowerPoint presentation. And
Why should you weigh it?
why should you weigh it?
Yeah.
Because you want to really have like a good idea of what the dose is. And I'm really methodical about how I do things. So like even like with cannabis therapy, I really like to like write down like strains and like what kind of an effect they had. And then like with cannabis assisted psychedelic therapy, you actually mix multiple strains. And so I've taken like copious notes on how like the different interactions between the different strains, and then like what the outcome was. But if you really are like keeping track, you can say like, okay, even with microdosing, like if I'm on a schedule of like 5 days on, like 2 days off, like these were the effects I had with like 0.1. And then over time you can like tell like, okay, like I like for depression, for instance, like 0 to 10, just like subjective scale, right? Okay, like my depression started out at like 8, and then I did it over a period of time, and like, oh, my depression's gone down to 5. And then, like maybe over time, like you notice it's not working as well, and so you can either take a break, or you say like, okay, maybe I want to do like 0.2, and then you keep track of it. But I would always weigh it, just because, especially with mushrooms, like volume and weight are not always like, like in a bag of chips, this is by weight, not by volume. You might not know exactly how much you're getting, and you might be taking way more than you want.
Related to weighing it, isn't it true that the tops have more psilocybin than the stems, right? Or is that not true?
It's not true. Like there's varying like theories on that, but for the most part, that's not true. There probably is like, it's probably variable like within that particular mushroom and from one mushroom to the next, and just because that's like the nature of how like plants grow. But I think that like even taking that into consideration, still having like a pretty good idea of, like I would say like a lot of people, not everybody, like some people like go old school and just like Michael Pollan talks about just like eating it and communing with it, and I really like that. A lot of people grind it up to make tea, whatever. So.
Are you familiar with the Scottsdale Research Institute? Is anybody here?
Is that Dr. Sue Sisley?
Yes, I just spoke with her. It was last night. Amazing lady.
So I heard her talk at the psychedelic conference a couple years ago.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, I just happened to get in touch with her and seeing what was going on at the institute. She's probably taking about 2 years out of clinical research for psilocybin.
Yeah.
And at least by next year they'll have a good foundation. But you were talking about how Arizona isn't as progressive as a lot of states. But back in '89, that's one of the reasons I left here. It just was not a progressive state. And went up to the Northwest and got inundated with progressive.
Yeah.
But, and now it's, I'm able to come back after 40 years, and it's a good place to be. Arizona's.
I mean, I love Arizona. That's why I'm still here.
Amen.
Despite the conservative nature,
Yeah.
I really love it here. I love the desert. There's a lot of things I love about Arizona, and I think not to get too off topic, but I think that for those of us that this has been like near and dear to our hearts, like really educating ourselves with things is like something that I've talked a lot about with like Adam is like legalizing versus decriminalizing. Like, who wants to drink government ayahuasca? Like, I mean, I sure don't, right? And that's like some of the concerns even with things that are being legalized. It's like, it worries me, especially with some of the like more natural medicines. Like, what is this going to end up looking like? But I think that if we all stay dedicated and we all stay educated and we stand up for what we believe in, then
Those are my words with Cambo. Where is it going? And all of a sudden, just over the last 2 years, it's just absolutely exploded around the planet.
it really has. That's another thing I was like joking with Adam. It was like I remember when I think like only Eduardo Huerta and myself were combo facilitators and maybe Kim. I think we were the 3 people I knew in Arizona, and I don't even like share with people that I do it anymore because there's so many people that I'm like I'll just focus on other things. But it's another medicine I really love. Combo's cool because it's legal, So keeping our fingers crossed.
That's something I can integrate with.
Combo's
Finding the integration after combo is much easier than the psychedelic experience that you're kind of going, I had these great thoughts.
I have this theory about combo, and I've been wanting to write a paper on this. But anybody that is familiar with like trauma work, there's the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach. And so the bottom-up approach is somatics. The top-down approach is like talk therapy. And I want to write a paper paralleling how combo is the bottom-up approach and psychedelics are the top-down approach and how they work together like symbiotically.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean that's why they're so great together, right? You can like do some combo, you can like shake all that trauma out of your body, like get rid of all of your toxins, and then be really open and clear, like for the psychedelics to work without having to go through like all of those blockages and so.
Do you know if there's any like health or like drain effects of like mushrooms? Like if for instance like someone doing like other not natural substances that like could cause you to not be all there. Does mushrooms have like that same effect since it's like natural, like on either your body or brain?
So, I think with anything you want to be responsible about how you're using it. And I really like that you asked like, well, how do I know like how much to take and how often, right? So, psilocybin, I would say like used really responsibly, can treat depression. It helps with like brain flexibility and plasticity. It has like a lot of really positive health benefits, and also people can take too many mushrooms and like have a psychotic break. So I mean I think that using it responsibly, nobody's ever died from using mushrooms. It's very safe, as far as like physically. I suppose that there could be an overdose like psychologically, but like I said, nobody's ever died. So like relatively, it's very safe. And like either getting some information from somebody that really can help you like walk through it. So my friend Ian that I was referring to, he's actually doing research with some doctors and growing like disorder specific strains. So he's actually treating like specific things with different strains of mushrooms. And so like really finding like the people I think that are in depth with the different medicines. There's like growing bounds of information and like literature and all kinds of like peer reviewed research out there right now that I think is pretty reliable. Yeah, of course.
If certain types of mental illness exist in the family or in you, it's probably not a good road to go though.
It might not be,
to say.
yeah.
I mean,
Like bipolar disorder, psychotic disorder, schizophrenia, like all of those things like it could predispose somebody to like having long-term like trauma and mental like more permanent mental illness. Sometimes people, or you may not have ever like had an episode of psychosis, but if it does run in your family and you do psychedelics, it can instigate that.
Nobody else. So for set and setting in your therapies over however many years you've been doing this, have you found any visual stimulus, videos, movies that you go to that you have found help people I know back when I was growing up, there was the camp of, let's watch Pink Floyd's The Wall.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and then after a while, I was like, no, let's not, because this is getting weird all the time. But I found something that always just changed the emotional anxiety out of everybody, and that's an old animation from the early 70s called The Point, from Harry Nilsson.
What's it called?
The Point.
Okay.
And it's Harry Nilsson and a couple of guys from the Beatles and such. But the animation is basically a storyline that takes you on the hero's journey of a little boy's perspective.
Okay.
But you have to deal with so much trauma in this, but when you're on psychedelics, it really takes you to kind of like the Wall, but without all the violence, the gore, and everything else. It's just a beautiful setting. And so I always found myself as to be the facilitator for parties once in a while, because it's like, yeah, let's do this with Michael, you know, he's kind of calm.
So, I mean, I have probably a pretty boring perspective on this one, but my favorite visual is an eye mask.
Yes.
like an eye mask.
It's covered.
Can you get that at the Apple store?
I mean, I have like a really nice variety of them. I have like some weighted ones with lavender, and I have like some different ones. But I guess on that one, I'm pretty down with like music and like creating the playlist. But I really can't argue with like closing your eyes and going inside, because otherwise, if you have your eyes open and you're sitting out, there's a lot of distractions. Like, so I mean, if you really want to have your eyes open, maybe creating your own art would be kind of cool. Like while you're under the influence. So like it's like self-generated visuals, right? But I mean, that would be interesting. I actually want to check that out later. So yeah, I think you know, especially like depending on what you're taking. Probably like my second favorite thing next to an eye mask would be nature outside, yeah, like they've done a lot of studies with just like looking at like a rose, like finding a flower, like even you know like if it's safe to just go and do a walk outside, that would probably, I think that you probably are not going to go wrong with that, unless you come across like the bear or the centipede. No.
Someday I hope to get through a whole psychedelic journey with an eye mask on.
You've never done that?
I can't get through it. I've tried, but I can't. I always take it off. I always end up taking it off.
Yeah?
Yeah. I don't know.
Something is done, just like after an hour, or it feels like an hour, could have been.
Right.
What kind of medicine?
Mushrooms, LSD. I mean, it's just one of, you know, you're having all these visuals,
right,
with the mask on, and,
right,
and eventually you're just like,
you need
what's
a break?
really going on? And you gotta take the mask off.
Well, I mean that's fair. I mean, you can like that's also like a way to like you know like titrate in and out of like intensity.
Yeah.
Like sometimes like when I'm doing cannabis sessions that are like really super intense, like just like taking your eye mask off and sitting up a little bit is like you can take like a little break and then you can go back into it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and then you can go. Yeah, you can kind of go in and out. Alex Gray art. You cannot go wrong with that. I don't know if you really want something to look at.
Yeah, Pablo Amaringo is really good too. His ayahuasca art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah. So somebody that's I mean maybe find something that like really like resonates with you. I have the Canopist like painting, so I really like that one. So that's a good one.
On kind of a different, just jumping thoughts. We all had a laugh with the slide that had the salvia divinorum and such.
Yeah.
Why is that still like unscheduled substance? I don't know. That can get really crazy. But do you know if there's any interaction between salvia and maybe psilocybin? Like any benefits? Because I've enjoyed bumping up the psilocybin experience with a little hit of the salvia, and it just kind of retakes you to that peak level in a peaceful way.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of experience with that.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's any papers written on any disturbances that could happen in the brain, anything, neuromuscular muscular kind of thing, just be disruptive.
Maybe check out the TripSit website.
Tripset.
TripSit and then Arrowhead. Maybe
Yeah,
that would be my best suggestion. Sometimes medicines that don't come from the same parts of the world, like that would maybe be like the first thing that I would like be concerned about, right? Like mixing, just because they are indigenously like local to one another, that might be something to take a look
The
at.
salvia is so compounded upon itself, it's really not the same structure as the plant. It's original, just
Yeah.
having the leaves and making the tea is different than that ADX leaves.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
To be honest, I have not done a lot of work with salvia, so.
I find it really fascinating. I actually did it with my daughter.
This is my card, and this is the clinic solutions. Okay. Yeah. No, you're
I got a
good.
question.
Yes.
What do you know about HPPD?
HPPD.
Yeah, hallucinogen persisting perception disorder.
So that's a really good question, Adam. So people that are colorblind are more likely to get HPPD after taking a psychedelic. So what HPPD is like persistent tracers or visuals.
Wow.
So if you are colorblind, that might be a really, really good thing to take into consideration.
And you won't be able to see my beard.
Well, the color blindness is like a predisposition for HPPD.
And there was just somebody who was a case report, N of one, but who, I think it was psilocybin, they stopped their color blindness for like 4 months. And yeah, there obviously needs to be more research, but.
Well, and then it's interesting because for some people that have color blindness, psychedelics have been the first time that they've actually seen colors, like in closed eye visuals. So, yeah.
Coming up on time. Maybe like 2 more questions.
We could be done. Everybody's done.
All right.
Any more? Any more
I
questions?
wanted to ask you a question afterwards. Am I able to?
Totally. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys so much for your time. And
Thank
your
you so much,
attention.
Chanda.
Thank you.